Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Pedro Noguera.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. What a pleasure to be here in Flint with you. I want to also extend my appreciation for Dawn Demps. I've been told already that people are in mourning here in Flint because she's going to leave to go to study in Arizona, so I want to congratulate you on that as she enters the doctoral program. I just want to say how good it feels to be here. Ever since the news about Flint started coming out, Flint's been in my heart. I've been thinking about you. I asked someone earlier today, how come we're not hearing people talk about it? And they said, because we've been done talking about it. We've been talking about it so long, people really want to move on. In certain ways, we can't move on, because the problems facing Flint are not just Flint's problems. They're American problems. And believe it or not, Flint has done a service to America just by pointing out that the water we drink can't be taken for granted. All across the country now we're hearing about lead in the water in Newark, lead in the water in different parts of California, and more evidence of what you know to be environmental racism. Environmental racism because the response to Flint made it clear that the people of Flint were expendable. And that's an American story too. And so to me, what happened with the water is also not unlike what's happening in education. Because we would like to hope that we could take the water for granted. That we could just go to the water fountain. In fact, I need some water at some point, so someone could help me out here. That we could just go get the water and drink it, not worry about what's in it. That we should be able to breathe the air, not have to worry about covering ourselves with a mask. That we should be able to send our children to school and have to worry about how they'll be treated and what they'll learn. But for those of us who've been engaged, we know that you can't take any of this stuff for granted. That we have to be critically engaged as parents, as communities, as children ourselves, as students. Because if we're not, we end up being victims of a system that more often than not reproduces inequities and keeps people in their place, rather than liberating minds and opening up opportunities. So I want to frame my remarks around, as you can see, what it takes to use education as a force for breaking the cycle of poverty. I want to start by saying that this is not usually the way we think about it. We talk about raising achievement. And I would say that is too narrow a focus. Right now we've got a number of people, scholars, some of whom I know well, who are really focused on grit. The idea that what we really need to do is to teach kids to work hard, okay, so that they can achieve. Well, I'll tell you this, from my years of experience, some of the hardest working people I know are poor. Yes. And they're not poor because they don't work hard. Right. They're poor because they're stuck. Okay. All the grit in the world without opportunity leaves you stuck. So we need to focus on more than achievement. I was struck because Katie Haycock was invited to be the keynote. And those of you who follow the policy debates might know, Katie and I are often on the opposite sides. Now when I listened to her, I also tweeted out, I agreed with 90% of what Katie had to say. Because she's focused on equity. She's looking at evidence. I think we've got to be focused on evidence. But I would also say the discussion is too narrow. Because if you only focus on what's happening in schools, she acknowledged poverty. But guess what? Poverty is an educational issue too. And if you ignore that, what happens? The kids with the greatest needs are always the kids who are least well served. That's what the data shows. The data shows our schools are reproducing the cycle of poverty. They're not breaking it. Now here's the thing. How many of you who are now well educated come from a family that was once poor? Raise your hand. Look around the room. How many come from a family that neither of your parents graduated from high school? Still got some hands. Mine too. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. I come from Brownsville, Brooklyn. Better known for producing rappers and boxers like Mike Tyson. Also produced college professors like me. All 6 of my brothers and sisters went to college, some of the best colleges in the country. Living proof that your background shouldn't determine what you can accomplish in education. So my question is, how do we do that work in Flint? I think we have set the bar way too low for what we should expect of our schools. Because we focus on the test scores. We got to focus on much more than that. You know? It's not to say they don't matter, because we need evidence that kids are learning. But the analogy I would make is, if you wanted to lose weight, would you focus on getting the best scale possible? And weigh yourself as frequently as you could? Or would you focus on the diet and the exercise? Well, in education, we've been focused on the scales. We have to focus on the work that needs to happen to get the scale to do what we want it to do, to elevate the performance. That's what I want to focus on today. So let me start by saying that we've been doing the wrong things because of the wrong policies. If I could get this to go backwards, maybe someone could help me with the slides, because it's not working backwards. Skip that slide. So, our policies have failed us. Katie said it already, No Child Behind left lots of kids behind. Why? Because it didn't do what Marian Wright Edelman called for. She's the one who came up with the term, leave no child behind. And it didn't mean test the kids as frequently as possible. She was about nutrition and health and all the things that kids need. We don't focus on those things. We tell schools you're failing. We don't tell schools what to do to improve. We assume that pressure is a strategy for improvement. Humiliation will make schools better. No evidence at all that pressure works. In fact, what it does is drive people who can out of the system and leaves those who can't behind. We do reforms to people, to teachers, to communities, not with them. And you know that well here in Michigan, because you've seen what reform has done to Detroit. So we need to really rethink the whole approach we take to change. Change is necessary. But what's been sold to us is reform by both Republicans and Democrats. Because let's be clear, President Obama is part of the problem too. And I admire this president. But his policies are almost identical to those of George Bush. It took their last 2 years in office for them to even acknowledge that inequality was a problem in American education. For them to document the disparities in access to preschool, the suspension of preschool children. Yes. Why? I said, Arnie Duncan, what took you so long to acknowledge this? We're in the middle of recession, and now you're acknowledging that poverty is a problem? Not reflected in Race to the Top at all. What they tell us in Race to the Top, fire the bad teachers. Fire the principal, as if they knew who the bad teachers were. As if in rural parts of this country you can just fire the principal and find a replacement. It's ridiculous. They fired all the teachers in Central Falls, Rhode Island. 6,000 teachers. You know what they did 2 weeks later? Hired them right back. Why? Because no one was there ready to take those jobs. We can't fire our way into a better system. We've actually got to help people to get better. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't fire some people. And it doesn't mean that we don't need to evaluate what we're doing. But we've got to do it differently than we're doing now. State of Florida puts letter grades on schools. All the way from, they can go to an A school or down to an F school. Katie's pointed out that many of the A schools still have kids that are not ready for college. I go to Edison High School in Miami, it's a triple F school. 3 years in a row, failed the state exams. I asked the principal, what happens if you fail again? He said, we will fail again. Because 80% of our kids don't speak English. Haven't been in the country long enough to pass the test in English. I said, what happens if you fail this time? The state says they'll take us over. I said, you worried? He said, not at all. He said, why not? He said, because there's too many schools just like us. He said, the state can't take us over. He says, what's more, do you think the state of Florida would know what to do if they took control? Is there some secret recipe they've been holding back on that they're going to now make available? You know that better than anybody else. Has the state of Michigan done anything to really help? No. This is not a strategy, this is a farce played out on us. And so we've got to stop looking to government to save us. We're not going to elect the right president or the right governor. We got to do this ourselves. And so part of what the message I want to send to you today is the answer to this problem lies in this community. Lies from our own efforts to embrace our children and embrace our schools. And that work can, in fact, be done. So help me, because this remote is not working at all. If you could advance things. 3 most important issues that we're not addressing in schools, 4 most important issues rather. Racial segregation, which is growing wider. Inequality in funding, because we are one of the few countries in the world that spends the most to educate the affluent and the least to educate the poor. Poverty, which I'll elaborate in a moment, and gaps in opportunity, the opportunity to learn. We focus on the achievement gap. We don't focus on the learning opportunities. Okay, please advance. We've been in a political battle between what I call the narrow approach and the broad approach. The narrow approach you know well, using pressure to foster accountability, focusing narrowly on achievement as measured by test scores, using test scores to rank people and to rank schools, adopting a scripted, teacher-proof curriculum, because you assume the teachers can't teach. Holding principals accountable, treating parents as consumers, not partners. Using a punitive approach to discipline, so you get rid of the kids you say have problems. And finally, encouraging competition among schools. So there's winners and losers. I've been an advocate for what I call the broad approach, which focuses on the learning conditions and asking, are the conditions in a school conducive to good teaching and learning, and focusing on that. Different focus. Using assessment to diagnose learning needs, not merely to rank, but to actually say, what does this child need? Developing the skills of teachers continuously, because here's the key. The skills of the teachers have to match the needs of the kids. Wow. Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Kids can't write means that teachers don't know how to teach writing. Period. Focusing on the whole child. Emotional, psychological, physical, as well as intellectual development. They're all interrelated. Holding everyone accountable. Everyone, all stakeholders. Parents have to be accountable. Children have to be accountable. Teachers, principals, governors, state legislature, superintendent, everyone's got to be accountable. We have a system that holds those with the most power the least accountable.
Yes.
Treating parents as partners, using discipline to develop character and responsibility, expanding learning opportunities, so we're not just thinking about a 6-hour day, but we're thinking about summer, after school, Saturday, because our kids need more, and promoting cooperation among schools, that schools learn from each other instead of compete. So all these things we know. Schools are influenced by their environment. They're influenced by safety, health, culture, all affects what happens in a school. Right? If you're in a sick community, guess what? That sickness is going to come to school. If you have violence in the community, the violence will be in school. Schools are not sanctuaries. They are embedded in communities. And so we have to understand that relationship. We also have to understand that the unmet needs of children will impact learning outcomes. The achievement gap is really about social inequality. That's what it's about. And that doesn't mean poor kids can't learn. It means that you can't ignore the needs. Lastly, bigger trends in our society are also influencing the character of schools, like income inequality, like immigration, like suburbanization and deindustrialization. Michigan, I always wonder about this. How can they talk about saving the auto companies? Right, that's one of the big accomplishments. Meanwhile, Detroit has died. How's that possible? How is that? Because Detroit used to be the center, right? How come none of those jobs trickled into Detroit? Well, anybody who's been in Detroit knows Detroit's rebounding, isn't it? Because there's a Whole Foods right down there. Guess what? Whole Foods is also known as Whole Paycheck. They don't go anywhere with this kind of a whole lot of money. Detroit is being remade for someone else. Right now. And so we have to be aware of what's really happening around us and ask ourselves, what do we do to respond to these trends? The main thing is we've got to recognize schools can't do it by themselves. And this is not to let the schools off the hook. It's simply to say the obvious. They don't have the resources. If you don't give them the resources, you're asking teachers to be social workers. They're not trained to be social workers. They're not trained to be psychologists. They're not trained to be police officers. We need to embrace the schools, even as we also hold them accountable. Robert Putnam, leading political scientist at Harvard University, wrote a book called Our Kids. It's about his town in Clinton, Ohio, a town which he describes in 1964 as having sent 80% of its kids to college. Kids from all kinds of backgrounds, black kids, white kids, poor kids, middle-class kids. And he goes back 6 years later, he says, what happened? Devastation. Now the only kids going to college are the kids from the wealthy families. On the other side of the tracks, failed schools, high dropout rates. What went wrong? What went wrong is that as a nation, we were once committed to fighting poverty. In fact, the Elementary Secondary Education Act, ESEA, formerly called No Child Behind, now called Every Student Succeeds, was drafted by Lyndon Johnson in 1965. And that's interesting because that Southern Democrat was once a teacher who taught Mexican kids on the border. And Lyndon Johnson understood when he was launching this war on poverty that we can't just focus on poverty or the schools, we have to compensate for poverty. So this law was, Title I was designed to compensate for poverty. It never leveled the playing field. But that was the intention, to compensate. Well, we moved away from that. When we were committed to that in this country, that's when the gaps in achievement closed to the greatest degree. You look at the data, 1970s when we made our greatest progress. That's also when we were most committed to racial integration in schools. Well, that's not even part of the discussion. 60th anniversary of Brown went by, it was not even mentioned by the Obama administration, where we stand now, even though our schools are more segregated now. We've gone back not to pre-Brown, we've gone back to pre-Plessy. Remember Plessy said separate but equal? Now we have separate and profoundly unequal. That's where we are. So I think we need to go advance that. Okay, so unfortunately we have people out there saying poverty is not the problem. So I'm going to read you this quote. This one, and I want you to, when you hear who says it, it's going to disturb you, right? In the debate over how to fix American public education, many believe that schools alone cannot overcome the impact of economic disadvantage as a child. That life outcomes are fixed by poverty and family circumstances, and that education doesn't work until problems are solved. This theory is in some ways comforting for educators. I don't know what educators will be comforted by that, some sick people out there, but the problem is the theory is wrong. It's hard to know how wrong because we haven't yet tried to make the changes that will tell us. But plenty of evidence demonstrates that schools can make enormous differences despite the challenges presented by poverty and family background. That was written by Joel Klein, former chancellor of New York City, Janet Murguia from the National Council de la Raza, and Michael Lomax from the United Negro College Fund. Three people who should know better. Joel Klein particularly because he was overseeing the largest school system in the country, and he had evidence every day poverty was driving outcomes. You know what? New York, like most districts across the country, spends less money to educate the poor children. The salary gap between teachers in the South Bronx and teachers in Staten Island is about $30,000 in the same district. Money matters. The only people who say money doesn't matter are people with lots of money. Advance the slide, please. As Katie told you earlier this morning, poverty rates have been rising, particularly amongst children. We have some of the highest child poverty rates in the world amongst advanced countries. 22%, 1 in 5. So I want to be clear because it's very easy in this environment to get misinterpreted. I am not saying poor kids can't learn. I'm going to describe you schools in a moment where they're thriving. So poverty is not a learning disability. But when you ignore children who are suffering from the effects of poverty, poverty can be disabling. When you know that child is hungry, and you ignore it and expect that child to do as well as the child who's full, when you know, for example, that child can't do any homework because they don't even have a stable place to live, and you grade them on that homework, That's an act of cruelty, of cruel indifference. Ignoring the needs of a child is not the same as making an excuse for poverty. What we've got to do is figure out how to respond to those needs, even as we demand more from children. So it's not either or, it's both. So we've got to shift the conversation. Right? And that's really what I want to encourage you to do here in Flint. Move away from the narrow focus on how to raise achievement. Here's the question you should be asking. How do we start getting kids excited about learning? Think about the difference in the question. If you started there, what do you need to know? What do you need to know if you want to get kids excited about learning?
What do they like?
What do they like? What are they interested in? How do they learn? How do they learn in the first place? What motivates them? We're not asking those questions. How can we use education to break the cycle of poverty? We've got to start thinking about how do we link education to economic development, to real jobs. Otherwise, you know what happens? Those who are smart and talented, who find a way to get an education, will leave. Because the only thing they can do is leave. This place has nothing for them. Right? And so we're losing our talented kids. Instead of them coming back to make the community stronger, they say there's nothing there for me. I got to get out. And then, okay, that's okay. The second question. How can schools become assets of their communities? That's what we should be asking. Anchors. In many of our communities, our schools are some of those stable institutions. And that's only because they have historically had stable funding. Now that's, in Michigan, that's a question now, right, of how stable the funding is. But that stable funding gives us the ability for the schools to be an anchor for the community. Right? But in too many of our communities, they are actually a part of the problem because they're not providing support children need. So advance the slide, please. So I want to give you examples now of models around the country that we can and should be learning from. Here's one in the Bay Area. This is the East Bay Biotech Academy. It's a partnership between 7 high schools, 5 biotech companies, 2 community colleges, and 1 four-year college. Students are learning biotech engineering while they're in school. They walk into jobs making $18 an hour while after they graduate from high school. In fact, while they're in high school, they can work and learn. And if they decide they want to continue, there's a career pathway into biotech that continues to the community college and the 4-year school. If they decide they're not interested in biotech, they've already done 4 years of science, 4 years of math, they can do anything they want. So it doesn't close the options, it expands the options. Where are the jobs for the future in Flint? Who should your partners be in thinking about getting kids jobs in renewable energy? Right? Because guess what, the oil's running out, and plus the prices haven't gone up. He's happy about that one, right? We've got to think strategically about opportunities in health, in food production. Because people that still need health and food, right? And we need to think, how can our kids be prepared in those fields? Grace Lee Boggs, who just passed away, was a leading thinker, even in '99, about how to think differently about education. Here's one of the best models people all across the world are learning from. Harlem Children's Home, started by Jeffrey Canada, which now serves 6,000 children in central Harlem. And it focuses not simply on education, it focuses on health, on parent education, on college enrollment, on jobs, summer jobs, music. Every kid gets to play a musical instrument. Now he has a huge endowment of $175 million. So people look at it and say, well, no one else can do that. But guess what? We have resources that we are not tapping into in our community because our schools are working in isolation from our city government, from our hospitals, from our universities. Doesn't mean that you can do this without money, but we have many more resources than we sometimes even acknowledge. We're not in a third world country. It feels like that sometimes. We have resources here. I was on a panel. I was actually moderating the panel with Jeffrey Canada, Arnie Duncan, before he was Secretary of Education, and the former Chancellor of Schools in New York. And I asked a question to Jeffrey. I said, is there any evidence that all the services you're providing these kids is going to raise their achievement? You know what Jeffrey said? He said, I reject the question. I said, why do you reject the question? He said, because we never asked that of middle-class kids. He said, if we let middle-class kids play the violin or get their teeth fixed, no one says it's not going to raise their test scores. We just let them play the violin and fix their teeth anyway. I said, good point. I said, Arnie, what do you think about that? And Arnie looked, he says, I think you could need some evidence. Now that was a telling sign, wasn't it? Because with poor kids, unless you can show it raises test scores, they'll take it away. They might take it away even if it does raise test scores. I saw a study the other day that said that eating lunch was good for test scores. I said, thank God. Thank God, they might take lunch. This is where we've come. You know, our kids need music, they need art, they need science, they need a whole well-rounded education. We don't think about middle-class kids that way.
That's right.
Only poor children. Advance the slide, please. So the key concept that we should be working towards is social capital. Social capital is ties, building connections, because poor people generally lack connections to influential people. That's why Dawn Demps, one of the reasons why you're going to miss her, she's a connector. Yes. She's a connector. She's got social capital. That's why she got Skillman and Kellogg up in here, right? She knows how to tap into the resources. Guess what? Learn from Dawn. Because when she's gone, someone's got to do this work. Okay? That's social capital our communities need. Social closure. You know what that's about? It's what James Coleman found. It's the reason why parochial schools do better than public schools. Because of trust. If there's genuine trust between the school and the parents, you know what happens? Reinforcement at home for what goes on at school. So if the school calls home and says your child's in trouble, what happens when you get home? More trouble. Because the parents know, I trust those teachers. I have a reason to trust them because I know they care about my kids. But if there's no trust, because the experiences have led you to believe you don't love my children, now what's going to happen? There's going to be a fight on your hands. And it's so simple, but guess what? 50% of student achievement is influenced by what parents do. And if you don't have a way to build a partnership with the parents based on trust and respect, there's a whole part of student learning that you're not going to ever tap into. Cultural capital. Why? Because unless a child is aware of their cultural resources, so they walk with pride and a sense of dignity, unless a child is aware that we live in a society where people are judging them based upon how they look, and is aware of how to deal with those prejudices, we will find talented children who get stymied, who get stuck, who get stopped. Because people don't stop to ask what your grades were if you look like they think you're a thug. Right. And if that child does not know how to talk to the police officer, could be in his life. So cultural capital, knowing how to code switch, is like being multilingual. And our kids need to be multilingual. They need to know when is it time to pull up my pants and why. We want our kids to be able to navigate the world. Not just that. I mean, we want to go to Japan, China, anywhere with dignity because they're grounded in a strong sense of who they are. Don't feel intimidated. Lastly, capacity building. Instead of pressure on schools, instead of threats, we should be doing what the Canadians do. You know what the Canadians do? Why they outperform us? If a school needs help, the Ministry of Education comes in and says, how can we help? And it's, oh, I guess you might need some more training for math teachers. You might need a social worker in here. So the school district in North America that's made the greatest progress in serving these poor kids is Toronto. Toronto. And they did that under a crack-smoking mayor. So you do that in Toronto with a crack-smoking mayor. Guess what? If we shift the focus, we can do a lot more here too. So here's an example of what's possible. What's possible when we believe our kids are capable. Here's a school. This is a 90-minute math class in East Los Angeles. Hollenbeck Middle School. You from East Ellington?
Yes, I am.
So you heard of Hollenbeck?
My grandma was a school nurse there.
All right. So here's Hollenbeck, and the kids are up out of their seats doing math. And the teacher's so good, she can sit in the back and talk to me. If she wanted to, she could do yoga. Because the kids are in control. The kids know what to do. And because they are doing the math like this, they're not just learning math. What else are they learning? They're learning all the social skills. They're learning how to work together, how to cooperate, how to listen. They are learning impulse control.
Yeah.
They learn to be human. It's a social experience. They're so immersed in the learning that when the bell rings, they're disturbed. They're not packing up 10 minutes before. You know what this is? It's the highest form of classroom management.
Yes.
Why? Because the kids are managing themselves. They're managing themselves because they're so engaged. And if one of them gets distracted, and they're middle school, so they're bound to get distracted, teacher can just go up and say, how's it going? Get them right back. Because she's a master teacher. Now here's the sad thing. She's right next door to another teacher who's teaching the cemetery method. You know the cemetery method? Line them up in rows, get them as still as possible?
Yeah.
That method doesn't work in middle school, does it? No. Anyway, how many of you taught middle school? Anything I know about middle school, learning better be fun. Because if it's not fun for them, they're going to make it fun. And so the question is, she's not working to control them, she is engaging them. And engagement is multidimensional. It's behavioral, it's cognitive, and it's emotional. How do you get kids to care? To want it? So they don't just give up when it's hard. So they don't just turn in slop. You know, kids will always turn in slop if you accept slop.
That's right.
You want to do something radical in Flint? Tell children every assignment is a first draft. Because the real learning is not in the first draft, it's in the revision.
That's right.
It's in getting it right. And the real teaching is not in the grading, it's in the feedback. The feedback helping the child to understand what's wrong so they get it right. So we need to learn, who are the teachers in Flint that know how to do this? I bet you got teachers in Flint that can do this. They might be in charter schools, they might be in public schools, but here's the sad thing. They're almost always working in isolation. We're not learning from what works.
That's right.
And that's the big challenge in education. How do you learn from what works so we can do more of it? If a teacher's never seen a child who can do that, they don't believe their kids are capable.
That's right.
They simply don't believe it. 50 books for boys. Here's a simple truth. You want to elevate achievement in Flint? Just get your kids reading. Just get them reading on their own time. But you want to get them reading? You got to give them something good to read.
That's right.
You got to give them something they don't want to put down.
That's right.
What are your kids reading? We know they play those video games. What are the books they're going to read this summer? How do we get it into their hands? And maybe we need to form book clubs so we're reading with them. And we can talk about it with them. Because if we can simply commit in Flint to getting every kid at proficiency by the 3rd grade, you know what would happen? Change across the whole system. It's a whole lot easier to teach reading in 3rd grade than in 10th grade. And so the ones who need more help, I bet you got people in Flint, retired teachers who could come and give one-on-one tutoring. We should be able to identify the kids. This one didn't make progress. We need some help for this one right now. Because some kids need more help. That's just the way it is. So we need to focus on meeting the needs of children, intervening and responding early, not late. Although sometimes we gotta deal with the late end too. So here's another school. Getting it right. And PS 28, it's in New York, but it might as well be Flint. Because it's in Bed-Stuy. Now Bed-Stuy is gentrifying, so it's changing. But her school's not. 40% of the kids are homeless. 25% of the kids with IEPs, right? Meaning they've identified as special ed. But it's a high-performing school. So Sadie Silva contacted me and said, Pedro, please come visit the school. I finally get out there. It's not far from where I grew up. So I want to see it myself. I get out there, she introduced me to her secretary. She said, I want you to meet the person who does all the administrative work. I said, well, then what do you do? She said, I'm the lead teacher. I had to become a principal to escape the classroom. I said, come on, let's go visit some classrooms. I go in the classroom, the first thing I see is every room has 4 and 5 adults. I said, where do you get all these teachers from? I said, they're not all teachers. I said, most of these are parents we trained to work with teachers. I said, do they get paid? She said, I have no money to pay them. They're volunteers, but we trained them first. So they are actually helping the teachers to manage the classroom, to assist kids with more help. See a boy raise his hand? Teacher just looks at him and nods. He gets up out of his seat to go use the restroom. He's back a few minutes later. I said, Sadie, I'm impressed. She said, why? I said, well, you know, some schools going to the bathroom is a major issue. She said, not this school. She said, if I can't teach my kids to use the bathroom responsibly, I have failed as a principal. That's part of her standard she sets for herself. Kids should know how to use the bathroom responsibly. She explains her school works through a series of partnerships. She has a partnership with a local hospital, so kids can get their immunizations, their eyes examined, their teeth fixed on site. She has another partnership with the YMCA, so the school's open every night till 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock is when the homeless shelter opens up. She doesn't want her kids out in the streets. So kids are getting art and music and chess all after school, a full range of after-school activities. They're learning more. She has another partnership with the job training agency, so parents who need it can get their GED, can get job training on site. She doesn't do it. The job training agency uses her space to do that for parents. She believes parents who are educated and employed will do a better job with their kids. Part of her vision takes me to a room, so let me show you the professional development going for my teachers today. 2 social workers, 8 teachers. Teachers are presenting the social workers with challenges they see in the kids. One says, I got a kid who's anxious, nervous all the time. Another says, I got a child who is aggressive, fighting. Another one's got a child who's depressed. Whole range of problems. One says he got a child who's attached. His attachment issues attached to my leg. I can't teach. And in each case, they're giving them concrete, practical suggestions. This is what you do. I'll come and observe you, see if it works. Let's talk about it. I turned to Sadie. I said, what made you offer this as a form of professional development for teachers? She said, my children are high need. High poverty, high need. My teachers have to be highly skilled. This is part of the skill development. Ongoing skill development. Otherwise, they'll refer too many kids with special ed. So let me introduce you to my guidance counselor. Takes me down the hall to introduce me. Says, I got to warn you, because I got him from the rubber room. Now, New York City is a place called the rubber room, where they put teachers who've been written up, and they could be in there sometimes for years, playing checkers, getting paid, not allowed to be in the school teaching kids. What? Never heard of that. You don't have that with him. So I said, how do you know to get this man from the rubber room? She said, well, I don't know why I was there in the first place, but he was my counselor when I was in school, and he saved my life, so I knew he was good. So I asked for it, and they said, you could have it. So I go in there and introduce myself to the counselor, and the little boy was with him. I asked the little boy, why are you here today? He said, I'm here to learn how to be good. So I said, is it working? He said, I hope so. I'm how to be put out of class. And then they explained the school has a no suspension policy. Because they don't believe sending kids home to watch television is an effective form of punishment. They really do focus on teaching kids to be good, to be responsible for their behavior. So I say, Sadie, I'm so impressed by what I've seen here. I'm going to tell the chancellor, who was Joel Klein at the time, what I've seen. So if you're going to talk to the chancellor, I got to show you one more thing. Takes me to our office, and I see our office, a big table in the room. I said, what happens here? So I'm working with kids all day long. Teachers can't address, because I'm the lead teacher. I said, but every child in this school has a learning plan. Every child. Nothing is left to chance. They know exactly where they are. They know exactly what kind of support they need. And they have a data system to manage it all. So I do write to Klein and tell him about what I've seen. I say, you need to visit. 3 days later, he goes. And he's so impressed, he writes it up to every principal in New York City. That's 1,800 principals in New York City. Tells them about what he's seeing. Except the only thing he mentions is the data system. Because New York City just spent $100 million in the data system. I write to him back and say, I'm so glad you went, but you missed it. Because it's not just the data system that makes that school work. It's all those things coming together that makes that school get those results. That's what you can't afford to miss. It is about that holistic vision that allows a school with those kind of demographics to get such good results. You can't ignore the needs of the children. So here's yet another example. Brockton High School. Largest high school in the state of Massachusetts, 4,200 students. Brockton is a poor, it's mostly black and Latino. It is, you know what it's known for? It's known for fighting. That's what it's known for. Rocky Marciano came from Brockton. Their mascot is the boxer. There's a statue of a boxer out front. You look them up, you will see they had a brawl at their last graduation. But you know what they're known for? They are one of 2 urban high schools in the state that gets a level 1 rating. Top performing schools. All the other level 1 rating schools in Massachusetts are in affluent white neighborhoods. Well, what does Brockton do that's different? 1998, when they were faced with their high-stakes exams, they decided, a group of veteran teachers went forward to the principal and said, the only way our kids can pass the exam is if every teacher becomes a teacher of literacy, regardless of the subject. Because kids are coming in, reading at a low level. The principal says, good idea, but I can't make the teachers do it. So we'll work with the willing. We don't have to wait until everybody's ready. So but I can't pay you to do it. So we'll do it on our own time. Highly unionized district. Everybody's in a union. But they're working on their own time. By 2002, 50% of kids passed, which is higher than expected, so they said, let's stick with it. 2006, 80% of the kids passed. Wow. Since 2010, over 90% of the kids passed the state exam, which is the most rigorous exam in the country. Over 1/3 of the senior class has gotten the highest possible score. That gives them a free scholarship at any public university. The demographics of the kids who pass the test match the demographics of the school. You don't have to get in trouble at Brockton. First thing you got to do is write about it. You got to write about it. Every opportunity is an opportunity for more writing. Advance the slide. Boston Globe said, look, Brockton High School has every excuse for failure, serving a city plagued by crime, poverty, housing foreclosures, and homelessness. Sound familiar? But Brockton, by far, the state's largest public high school with over 4,200 students, has found success in recent years that has eluded many of the state's urban schools. MCAS scores are soaring, earning the school's state recognition as a symbol of urban hope. You know what they were doing in Boston, in Springfield, and the other, Lawrence and Lynn, the other urban centers, Lawrence being controlled by the state? They were doing test prep. And guess where they are now? They're still down the bottom. They weren't meeting the needs of the kids. They weren't challenging them. So this is not about lowering expectations. It's about raising them up, but it's also about knowing how to meet them. You can't just raise the standard and not make it accessible. You gotta do both. Parents. Parents are the untapped resource. You know, how many times you go to school and think they can do it in spite of the parents? Or without the parents? Because they blame the parents.
That's right. That's right.
So here's a school in South Africa, in the townships outside of Port Elizabeth. Poverty, you talk about poverty, they got poverty at a level Flint's never seen. Hope it never does. 80% of the people unemployed, 40% of the children orphans, because their parents had died of AIDS. Talk about deep, entrenched poverty and hopelessness. The principal was there in the back of the room. Bruce Davis said he gets sent to the school. By the Ministry of Education, he gets there, the school's in shambles. Broken windows. No water can come into the building because they stole the pipes. Kids not coming, teachers not coming. He's assigned to be the principal. What's he going to do? He starts out by holding what he calls a Thanksgiving party. With food and music, he said, I'm going to thank the community for supporting my school. So they come to get the food. They said, well, we haven't supported school. He said, no, I'm thanking you in advance. So he said, first thing we got to do is we got to put a stop to the vandalism. They said, well, we know who's been ripping off the school. Some boys out there, they call them Tutsi, right? Gangsters. He said, I'd like to meet them. So he goes to meet them. They just explain, look, we don't have anything. We're just trying to get by. He says, I'll cut you a deal. You provide security at the school, I give you free housing at the school. So now the guys who used to rob the school protect the school. He goes to the parents. He said, you know what? We got to figure out a way to feed these kids because these kids are coming to school hungry. He said, look at all the land we have. Why don't we have a garden here? He says, let's make a deal. You guys work the garden, half the food goes to you, the other half to the children. Now there's a big, bountiful garden, and they still have room for playing fields. There's a group of parents that work a clinic. Nobody's trained. I said, what happens if the kid's really sick? He said, half the time, just give him a glass of water and tell him lay down. It usually works. So if he's really sick, we got to call in a nurse, right? But there are parents there who don't get paid. Over 80 parents a day who do everything from clean bathrooms to assist teachers. I kept asking the parents, what makes you do it? They said, well, our kids are here. And they said, guess what? We weren't doing anything anyway. And now, because of what we're doing, people like you come to visit us. I asked Bruce, I said, wow, how did you turn it around? He said, because I knew I worked for them. I don't work for the ministry. So when the parents were protesting because teachers haven't been paid for 3 months, he was right up there with them. I said, you know, in the United States, you want to see a principal protesting off like that. He said, listen, if I don't protest with them, they'll be coming after me. I'd rather be with them. He gets it. The parents are a resource, not an obstacle.
That's right.
Partnerships have to be rooted in empathy and respect. Not sympathy, not pity,
That's right.
but empathy.
That's right.
Bruce has empathy. And because he does it, that school has gone from a wasteland to a thriving community school. So, we have good research of what it takes. It comes out of the University of Chicago. These are the 5 essential ingredients for school improvement. They studied 10 years of reform in Chicago. Question they asked, well, most schools did get better, but some did. What did the schools that got better have in common? Here they are. A coherent instructional guidance system. What does that mean? It means teachers aren't working in isolation. Teachers aren't doing their own thing. Teachers are collaborating. Teachers have clear guidance on what good teaching is. Second, ongoing development of the professional capacity of the staff. Because as I said earlier, the skills of the staff have to match the needs of the kids. Our universities do not produce master teachers. They produce novice teachers. If they're going to become masters, they can become masters in the schools. That means they're going to need a lot of ongoing help and training. Third, a strong school parent community ties. All the schools have it that perform. Fourth, student-centered learning climate, a culture of high expectations, high morale, strong positive relationships. And fifth, shared leadership. Shared leadership to drive the change. I saw all of these ingredients come together in Brownsville, Brooklyn, at a middle school I was visiting last fall. Brownsville is the poorest part of Brooklyn, right? The part that definitely hasn't gentrified. Go to the school, to sign in with the guard at the door. A mom comes in with her 5-year-old. She says to the guard, I'm late, I don't have time for this. Guard says, come here, sweetie, you can go. So I turned to the guard after mom leaves. I said, she's supposed to sign him in, isn't she? He said, she is. I said, you just let her go. I said, yeah, she's stressed. The guard is exercising leadership and compassion. I go up the stairs. I meet a little boy. He's walking up, it's like a death march. I thought he broke his leg. I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm tired. Get upstairs, principal sees him. First thing she says to him is, I'm so happy to see you. Now take your hat off and get to class. She doesn't berate him for being late. She doesn't say, go sit in my office until I got a chance to discipline you. She says, I'm happy to see you. Now go to class. Go to see the assistant principal. He's in there disciplining a student. He said it doesn't sound like discipline, it sounds like praise. He's going on and on about what a leader you are, how other kids look up to you, but you make bad decisions. And then he proceeds to tell me all these wonderful things about him. He's good at math, he's an athlete, but he makes bad decisions. Boy, it's beaming. So now come back to me at lunchtime, we're going to talk about those decisions. He's holding him accountable, but he's not beating him down. He understands his job is to change the behavior, not to push him out of school. So when you look at the schools where these ingredients come together, what do you see? You see kids are learning. Kids from all kinds of backgrounds. Homeless kids, kids in foster care, kids in group homes. They're learning, they're thriving. Because the school is organized to meet their needs. That's the work you got to be committed to in Flint, in Detroit, and all the other communities that need it. Because we can't continue to accept the cycle of failure that we've been seeing in our schools. If you can do this work in the townships of South Africa, you can do this work in Flint. Yes. And in Flint, they're not waiting for the government to help them. I mean, not Flint, in Port Elizabeth. I said earlier about this debate about grit. Instead of focusing on grit, which is an individual attribute, we should be focusing on agency. Yes. Right? Agency is not just individual, it can be collective. That's what we need in Flint, collective agency. It recognizes there are real barriers, but then we strategize. How do we overcome those barriers? And barriers are not imagined, they're real. And it's measurable. You know what's the greatest example of grit I know? Harriet Tubman. Yes. Harriet Tubman. Here she is, 4'11", disabled, illiterate, a woman. At a time when women didn't have a whole lot of rights, plus a slave. Freed more people from slavery than any other individual. She became a spy for the Union Army. You know why? Because no one thought someone like her was capable of what she was doing. When she was asked later on, how did you manage to free so many people, she said, I could have freed more had they not been afraid. It was their fear that held them back. Are you afraid to do what our kids need? Think about this, in Michigan, you all love your football teams, don't you, in Michigan? You love them Wolverines, what's it, Spartans. You used to love the Lions, but I guess you can't love them too much anymore. Do you love your children as much as you love football? Because if we did, it would be reflected in the way we invest and we treat them. You know, I can't tell you I'm going to go to a community where they're investing all the resources in sports and none in children. Belle Glade is a small community right outside of West Palm Beach. Belle Glade is dirt poor. No indoor plumbing, dirt roads, all kinds of social problems. Has produced more professional football players than any community in the United States for the last 40 years. Some say it's because the grass is so high. You have to run fast to get around here. I say it's because we love football. And because we care so much about football, we will find talent anywhere with football. If we cared about it, we could get pharmacists and lawyers and writers out of that community too. We've got to be focused on developing the talent. Advance the slide, please. So, we need a holistic vision. We need a holistic vision that keeps teaching and learning at the center, but looks at how we extend learning time, extend learning opportunities, focusing on issues like safety and health, community partnerships, family engagement. We need to think about all of it coming together to support our children, support our schools. Let me finish with the story that that the president introduced me mentioned. I got up one morning early. I used to live in Washington Heights, which is basically Harlem, right, in New York. And get up early to go speak in Westchester to a group of teachers. So I'm up there about 6 in the morning. The only thing open at the time is McDonald's. So I go up there to get some coffee, and there's a guy in there, and he has the look of someone who's been up all night. You know that look? And he's berating another customer. He's trying to get some money out of him. Speaking Spanish. You know, he wants $1. He wants $1. Guy's trying to ignore him. And finally, the guy gets his order and leaves. So now the guy who's been begging looks at me. And he sizes me up or down. He says, "You're OG, aren't you?" I said, "That's right." I said, "How could you tell?" He said, "I can see the scars." He doesn't know how I got those scars, but he said, "What you doing? You're all dressed up. What you doing in here?" I said, "I'm going to go talk to some teachers." He said, "Teachers?" He said, "I hate teachers." I said, "Why do you hate teachers?" He said, "Look at me." He said, "I could have been something. Now I'm out on the streets." He said, "You tell those teachers today that teach those kids well, they got to worry about more people like me." And I did tell them that. That's the other side, right? When we fail, we continue to produce people who lead these lives of desperation. Who do we incarcerate? Yeah. Almost always those we fail to educate. Yes. Yes. We can do better. We must do better if we have the will and the commitment to give our kids what they need and deserve. Thank you.
Again, for the sake of time, I'm going to tell you, I'm a trained facilitator. I am picking different people than were picked this morning. If they had a question this morning, don't ask about a question right now. We'll take 5, just because we have one more event to take Dr. Noguera to, and then he has to go to the airport. So I need somebody else to come up here and help me with my 5 people. Who else wants to help me with some eyes? Okay, y'all gonna just leave it on me. You're gonna help me, Mr. Russell? Can we choose 5? If you have 5 questions, please raise your hand. Or 3 and however many. Whoever has a question, first hands we see up. That's 1, 2. You don't have a question? Okay, 1. Anyone else?
2, 3.
Remember your number.
The 10th man has a question. 4. 4.
1 more. Anybody else? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Number 1.
Thank you. Simone Lightfoot, trustee with the Ann Arbor Board of Education. How can districts that are considered wealthy districts very privileged districts, particularly around our state at this time. How can we lend and lift our voice for those districts who are not in the same situations financially, policy-wise? How can we lend our brand to help the broader community that is not where we are today?
So I know Ann Arbor too, and I know that you also struggle with those disparities within Ann Arbor, and that's been a challenge there. But I do think that in places like Ann Arbor, where there's a lot of goodwill, that you have to be a voice for equity, right, throughout the state. Equity means giving the schools what they need so they can be successful. And it needs to show up in our funding policies, it needs to show up in the support systems that we provide to schools. And so at the beginning, education is political, and we need to make sure, because if it's only coming from the usual suspects, then it's easy to kind of dismiss it. Right? And that's why we need to build broad multiracial coalitions, right, in support of public education, and we need to make sure that equity is at the heart of it.
Number 2.
Hello, my name is Tracy Smith from Detroit, and what are your thoughts concerning single gender education, specifically all boys classes?
So I did a book on that called Schooling for Resilience, in which we looked at several of those single gender schools. And what we learned shouldn't surprise anyone. We learned that the secret is not separating the boys. The secret is good teaching, good leadership, strong culture, all those things I mentioned. You can separate the boys all you want. If you don't do those things, all you've done is create another bad school. Right? And so in our study, we found some schools that were successful, but not because the boys were separated, but because they were provided a good education. And then we found some schools that were failing and actually had been closed. Now, some of those schools are getting a lot of attention because they send a lot of kids to college. We got to look at the data there too, and ask how many of those kids actually stay in college, right? Because getting kids into college, especially those for-profit private colleges, is easy, right? But if they leave with a whole lot of debt every year, what have we accomplished, right? So we need to be tough-minded as we look at this.
Okay, number 3.
Jeff Bean, I'm a retired Flint school teacher and currently work at Fair State University in their School of Ed. And so I would like to ask, I spent 30 years being taught by this teacher to the students of Flint. Now I'm trying to think about what the best way to focus in working with my elementary ed teachers. We're going to be those novice teachers going out. Where do you think I can spend the best amount of time getting them ready to go out into the world for that?
Great question. Thank you for asking. Go to Ball State, Muncie, Indiana. Okay? What a place to go, right? I was there this spring. They have a program there called Communities in Service, Schools in Service of Community. They take their teacher education candidates, and for 6 months they're doing an internship in the community. And they're mentored by a community, someone from the community, and who's teaching them about what it's like to live here. So what it does is it alters the whole way, because these are mostly white kids from rural Indiana now going to a black community. They said they need someone who's going to introduce them to the community so that they can alter the mindset. I talked to their teacher candidates. I said, what was hardest for you about this? I said, the hardest thing was overcoming our prejudices. The hardest thing will be leaving, because of the bonds we formed with people. One of them said to me, I don't know how I could be a teacher without having had this kind of experience. He said, my other students that didn't get it, they're still afraid. They don't want to go to Indianapolis, or much less Gary. Right? So I'd encourage you to look at that. There are a lot of places that don't get multicultural education right, because they think it's just about what's in a person's head. If you're not comfortable day to day in interacting, that doesn't make a bit of difference. And the kids can tell. They can tell if you're afraid of them. They can tell if you don't like them. They can tell. They can sniff it out.
And we have number 4.
Yeah. Sean Jones, I was curious to know if your PowerPoint would be available for download.
Absolutely. You can copy it back. Since you're the tech man, you can copy it right now.
And then Sean send that to me. www.passflint.org. It will be up there. Okay, number.
One more question.
I know I asked one earlier today, but you have to wait. We have to do 5 first. Who's my 5?
So I think sometimes in our efforts to protect black boys, we scare them and intimidate them and try to be tougher on them because the world's going to be tough. I'm curious about your thoughts around a different approach because I don't think that one's working for us.
Yeah, it usually doesn't. You know, it's going to sound trite. Black boys need what everybody else needs. They need a chance to be themselves. They need a chance to be supported. They need a chance to make mistakes and not have it used against them. They need a chance. They need to be themselves. They need to be loved, right? And so, you know, people start to think, oh, they need something special for black boys. It's not really true. I have 2 of them at home. They're big now, right? But really what they need is the opportunity to be themselves. The biggest obstacle for our boys aside is the stereotypes. Right? The stereotypes that lead them and others to believe that they can be a ball player or a rapper or a thug, but not a mathematician or a writer or a musician. We need to create the space where they can be anything. This name of school, this is a single-sex school. Excellence for Boys, a charter school in Brooklyn. Every boy, it's all black boys, all from the projects. Every boy at the school, starting in 3rd grade, learns to play violin. Now, why violin? Anybody? Well, I know Teresa plays a musician. What do you learn when you learn, besides the issue, what else are you learning when you play violin?
Math.
You're learning some math. You're learning posture, regularity, discipline, breathing. You watch these kids, they're learning self-control. Whoa! And now these kids, these little black boys walk through Harlem with their violin cases and their ties. You know what? They think they can be anything they want. Anything they want. Because they're breaking the stereotypes with that violin too. So, they figured it out.
Okay, we're going to let you go last.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
If you were given the opportunity and if people really were encouraging to you, would you ever consider becoming the Secretary of Education?
I don't see that in the realm of possibility. So I'll tell you why. Because I have, one of the things I've done over the years, I was on the school board at one point in my life. And about 3 months into it, I realized that I made a mistake. This was not for me. School board, because all you do, when you're in politics, you spend most of your time raising money. Right? So if I was in politics, nobody would want to talk to me. You say, oh, you're going to have some money, right? Or telling people what you think they want to hear, because you're worried about not alienating anybody. And I think, unfortunately, those political positions are a lot like that, right? If you really have integrity and you want to do what's right, you end up alienating people. Look what's happened to John King. I know John King, the current Secretary of Education. He's took a stand for equity on school funding. Not only is he being attacked by the Republicans, he's been attacked by the teacher unions. Yes. Right? And I have I have issues with John King because I know him from New York when he was a commissioner there. But when you take a stand for justice, you often have to pay for it. So, but at the same time, I do feel a call to serve, right? And so right now, I'm trying to work in LA. You know, that's where I live. I always feel I have an obligation to work where I live. So I'm advising the superintendent. You talk about problems. They got huge budget deficits. They're losing kids. LA could be gone as a school system in the next couple of years if they don't figure out how to deal with it. So I'm strategizing with what to do, strategizing with the board. So we'll see. I'm hoping to be of service, even if I don't end up taking a job like that.
Okay, please give him a round of applause.